The 361 AG4 has a fit and profile unlike a lot of other shoes that I have seen recently, especially once you tear it open and actually see what is under the hood of these. It is very interesting as to what your foot feels versus what is exactly underneath of your foot. Super interesting shoe, and I think it's going to be a surprising pickup for a lot of different people. So let's get into it. And before I get into the uppers, big thanks to Kickscrew for sending me a pair of these over to check out. And speaking of checking things out, the first thing my eye went to was actually the stitching in the uppers all the way here in the toe box. They actually used stitching to make more of a drag guard. It almost looks like flight wire down here, but it's integrated into the stitching into the uppers. That's pretty interesting because number one, you got rubber that comes up over the toe box. Then you actually have reinforced stitching, which I haven't really seen a lot, but it's pretty neat actually, and it makes the toe box just a little bit beefier as well. If you look at it on the upper durability test though, 10 seconds highest grit sandpaper, you know, the burr starts to get through that wire, but it does not make it all the way through there. So I think if you've got these on indoor courts, I think the coefficient of friction is going to be low enough between like a waxed hardwood and these shoes to where you're not going to see crazy wear on it. But I would get ready for this to start looking just a little bit weird if you're an extreme dragger and you're wearing these for the long haul. But moving from the tips of the toes up into the rest of the shoe, you know, the bulk of the uppers is made from this TPU weave with some textiles going through there. Now, as you go up into the tongue, it becomes much more honeycombed, much more porous in there. If you look at that on the breathability test, there may have been a little bit of home cooking because the tongue is just so porous and breathable. It only heated up 94.3 degrees, then cooled down another 36.6 degrees. And this shoe is a little bit more maximalist, but the tongue is a little bit thinner. So if you are someone that wants a little more protection, probably would be putting a little bit of piece of like adhesive felt underneath of that tongue. Now, if you look at the medial side, you got a little bit of textile reinforcement, just kind of like a waxy layer. Then as you go up into the lace line, there's a lot of reinforcement on that lace line. That kind of integrates in with the heel counter, as well as the plastic reinforcement that goes here on the lateral side. Now that really all culminates here in the rear foot, which makes the rear foot of these the heaviest part of the shoe. When you pick these up, all the weight is right axial to your leg, right? So it's right straight down. So even though there is a little bit of heft on this shoe, you don't really feel it as much because it's axial to your leg, right? It's not out here, so you're not having to lift it up, right, when you're pushing up and down. So I'm not sure if that was intentional or not, or that was just all the, you know, the foxing and all the stabilizing elements on the shoe kind of culminating in the heel, but it definitely makes it a lot easier. Speaking of that lace line, these lace eyelets go pretty high and vertical. So if you're not doing a runner's knot, if you're just doing standard lacing on this, it really does cinch all that padding around your Achilles and your ankle down really well. So it wraps pretty high around your ankle, giving you a really outsized lockdown, especially for, you know, more of a mid shoe. But the part of the AG4 that confused me the most was the midsole. Now, on the teardown, it is, you know, an entire bed of thermoplastic foam, and then not a really long shank, but it's pretty broad going here into the medial side, so you do get a lot of arch coverage. However, on foot, it feels like there's a giant bounce house underneath of you. The feeling of air tension under you, but like forgiving air tension, right? Like in a bounce house, it'll let you kind of go down, right? It's on a trampoline. You can jump on it, but you know, there is a lot of that forgiveness, right? You could put a really heavy person, throw them up in the air and let them come down, and then there's still a lot of, you know, weight redistribution and shock absorption. And just the feeling of forgiveness underfoot, especially on an outdoor court on this shoe, was something that, I mean, I thought I was going to cut this thing open and the stack was going to be like 6 centimeters. Not I'm exaggerating, but it feels outsized for what is actually underneath it. Because when you look at it open, the stack height's, you know, not all that high. It just doesn't look like what it feels like, right? When I had it on underfoot, I thought there's got to be layers of foam and all this different stuff going on. I mean, if you look at the bounce height test on these, 40 centimeters in the heel and 47 in the forefoot. I think it's interesting about some of these thermoplastic foams is that some of them, where you have more of the foam, more air tension underneath of it, the ball bounces higher in the heel. And then in some of them, where there's more contact and more ground reactive forces, right, where the stack is lower, those do better. And in this one, you get more like absorption in the heel and then more snap and bounce in the forefoot, even though it is the same foam. It's just the level of the foam and how much of it is there, that kind of determines how it's going to react with your foot and the ground. And so, like I said, on these, when I was coming down on my heel and landing over and over again, the feeling of shock absorption, just the feeling of protection was so nice. And we'll get into that in the fit section. But really, outsized feeling on the midsole for what it actually is when you tear it open. But getting into the outsole tread, I actually think 361 missed an opportunity to make this in two versions, maybe like an outdoor tread and then an indoor. I know this is a signature shoe for an NBA player who's gonna be playing on hardwood, but the midsole performance of this shoe on outdoor courts is just so elite that I think maybe in future generations of this shoe or future releases of this shoe, maybe they should, just because it matches up so well. But the outsole tread, it is a pretty thin, shallow tread depth, kind of quasi herringbone. It does get into this really serrated razor pattern here in the midfoot. So the traction is good because it's kind of a full length tread pattern. That shank breaks most of it up, but there is a tread bridge there. The tread depth is just so shallow. So, on indoor courts, it grips fine. It does pick up a little bit of dust. The one thing is it has these two giant air channels that go through the forefoot here. So on an outdoor court, while the tread is new, they grab very well because of that. And on an indoor court, they transition from step to step so well because of these air channels here. And speaking of that profile, if you look at the outsole durability test, 10 seconds highest grit sandpaper, about 1 millimeter damage on about 1.5 millimeters of tread depth. So in the durometer is not very high on these. It's more medium, kind of medium soft. And like I said, that's what makes these grip very well on indoor courts, and that's why they're an NBA signature shoe. So I still think they're a good outdoor shoe. Once you feel them underfoot, you'll kind of see what I'm talking about. It's just that the outsole isn't going to last very long whatsoever. But if you look at the speed ratio of these, I think that's where the engineering of the shoe really shines. They come in at 2.66, which is pretty darn good even for that weight under there and for the profile of the shoe. They actually are pretty speedy, right? You can still get a little bit more ground feel on them. You can still cut and turn very easily on these. They pick up speed very well. And like I said, they launch off the ground very well. So for a more maximalist shoe, for a little bit more speed, a little bit more pop, this is also a very good pickup. All right, but getting into the fit of the AG4, they do fit a little bit big, tad long, so narrow foot, I think you can go down half size, medium, go true, unless you have very short toes and you can go down half size. And then 2E, I think just go true to size. A 4E, I think go up 1/2 size. If you want a real performance fit, you might just try to break it in at your standard, but probably go up 1/2 size. If you have super short toes, obviously you go down. But these just fit like a more maximalist shoe, right? Now, in terms of the snake bitten foot, like I said, these I think are one of the more elite protective shoes out there, especially for anything shock inducing like Achilles, plantar fasciitis, metatarsalgia, post-stress fracture, things like that. An orthotic in these, a well-fitting orthotic in these, I think takes these up to one of the best shoes for protection of the year. And like I said, if you're someone that needs protection on an outdoor court, even though the tread's not going to last, I think it might be worth buying a couple, right? Or just having a couple of them in your arsenal for the year, just having like one that you take outdoors, one for whatever, I don't know. But I think it might be worth it, especially just maybe for the short term if you're kind of coming back from an injury, to have them on, and then you can either dump them, go to something else that's a little bit more outdoor friendly. Now on indoor courts, same thing. They're going to be super protective. They're going to be great for that stuff too. It's just that I noticed these on outdoor courts more than others had a much better protective element to them. Like I said, hopefully maybe later in the year they'll come out with maybe like an outdoor focused tread, because like I said, I think they capture a huge portion of the market with that. And last but not least, looking at the performance playability of the AG4, I will say the break-in in terms of dorsiflexion, plantar flexion took a little bit because the lace line is so vertical. Now that comes with a great lockdown, but you're definitely going to want to wear these around the house a little bit before you go out and play in them. The interesting thing is like I said, they play like a maximalist shoe, something for like a power forward or even a larger center. Once you break them in, they play more shifty, right? And so over the life of the shoe, they play a little bit different. I still think for a rebounder, someone that needs to get up off the ground a lot and need a lot of forgiveness, especially for more crash landings, and for someone that needs a lot of lift in the forefoot and a lot of forgiveness in the rear foot, this, like I said, perfect marriage. Now, of course, they're not going to be as shifty as the Sabrina 1s or the 808s, but for a maximalist shoe, want to get a little bit more footwork in there, this is great. Even for someone like a point or a shooting guard that wants to wear a little bit more of a maximalist brace, just needs maybe coming back from an injury, just needs more protection, I think this is also a good pickup. Like I said, this shoe I think can either be your number one shoe, kind of like, the first in your rotation, or a shoe that you use, kind of post-injury almost. Like this is kind of like a step down shoe, right? You know, you go from boot, brace, and a shoe. This is kind of like the one you might want to be using. So like I said, get the break-in done with around your house first, and I think you're going to experience a lot better playability on these. And like I said, if you're going to use them outdoors for their midsole capabilities, just get ready for them to start wearing down a little bit faster. So like I said, I was pleasantly surprising, especially because the AG3, I thought, a little bit more clunky. It was good, but it was just a little more clunky. This one, definitely a little bit more shifty, that they kind of engineered this to be, I think, maybe just to fit a wider range of players. That was really nice to see. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about the AG4 in the comments down below, especially if you had someone that would like to sacrifice outsole durability for outdoor play and protection. I'd love to know if you're one of those people in the comments down below, because that's kind of someone like me. So love to hear your thoughts on that down below. And if you want to see the younger cousin to the AG4, the AR1 Austin Reeves' new signature shoe going to the knife, make sure you click into this video up above and subscribe down below. Respect your rubber and foam. I'll see you somewhere in the Sneakerverse.